So Kevin, I do have a question for you though.
Yes.
What do I win?
What do you win for what?
USB bingo.
Oh, you win a free token for future games of USB Bingo.
Okay, that's wonderful.
Right. No, for those without the context of Twitter from 10 days ago or whenever it is you're hearing this, I tweeted out asking people informal survey: how many different USB cables do you need in your day-to-day life? And because I was curious, and Alex announced that he needed one. I called him a liar, and he subsequently provided 8 different USB cables.
I guess.
Well, no, I am generally curious because this is this is why I was very lukewarm about USB-C, and just that I was so excited to only have one cable, and I was getting very close there.
Mm-hmm.
But it was mini and micro were at least starting to consolidate people, and now they're not. So how many cables do you actually need for your regular use devices, Alex?
For my regular, day-to-day usage?
Well, or things that either are plugged in by default or get plugged in regularly.
So I need USB-C to charge my computer.
Mm-hmm.
I need a regular USB to USB-B, 3.0. So USB 3.0 to USB-B 3.0. Because that's plugged into the monitor. So I can plug my keyboard and my mouse into my monitor and have them go to my desktop or my laptop, depending on whatever's plugged in.
Okay.
And are you counting Lightning? Is Lightning a USB cable?
No, that's not a
No?
USB cable. No.
Okay. All right.
Because they're always going to be some, in the same way that I have an XLR cable coming out of my mic. That's like, I don't expect that to ever be like, it's just regular USB-C.
And then I guess the only other thing then is the micro USB on the mic that I'm using to talk to you right now.
What about your phone?
My phone charges over Lightning.
Oh, okay. And Kindle? Do you do Kindle?
I wouldn't consider that an often used device.
Okay.
I usually read on my phone unless I decide, hey, I want to reread this book and I have nothing else to do today, then I'll dig out the Kindle.
Okay.
But I might read for half an hour before I go to bed, just to help calm the brain, and I just do that on my phone.
Oh man, I can't read my phone. It hurts the eyes, man.
Well, it's great because I just updated my phone and now it can do flux. So my phone adjusts its screen temperature in the evening, and it's great for reading.
Android had that for
I don't care, Kevin.
Years.
I don't care. I don't care.
Wait, so you couldn't just install it? There wasn't a Flux. I thought Flux had an iOS app.
So Flux did for about 3 milliseconds.
Okay.
And then it got removed from the Apple Store.
Why?
Because it was accessing an API it wasn't supposed to, I guess. Or Apple said it was duplicating existing iOS functionality because the next beta had this Flux built-in thing.
Wow. Good old Apple. That wonderful company.
Now it's built into the operating system. It's great.
Okay. So they Spotified Flux.
You can download Spotify on an Apple product.
Well, I don't know. I haven't used. I don't know.
Yeah,
I wouldn't know.
So they didn't block Spotify for duplicating built-in features. They don't block Amazon Music and stuff because they're gonna get sued.
Did they block
to do
Google
that.
Chrome?
No, Google Chrome's installed.
Oh, okay.
Google Chrome just has to use the Safari WebKit engine though, so it's not allowed to use. It's not allowed to use its own rendering engine.
Then why? Then what is the value of actually using Chrome?
Because if you have all your passwords saved, if you have all your account, if you want to synchronize your browsing history, if you want to open across devices, then that's why. But
awful.
it has to use the Safari.
You have
WebKit.
to use the crappy Safari. Apple.
It's super fast though.
Awful.
It's super fast.
Apple is terrible.
It is not. You're using a MacBook. Why would you be using a MacBook if you thought it was terrible?
I'm using a Mac because I don't really have a better alternative.
So everything is terrible then.
Well, yes. If I could be using, it's like democracy. It's
Wow.
no, it's it's the worst one except for all the other ones.
Yeah.
No, I would switch back to Linux in a heartbeat if I could get if Adobe CC was available on Linux, I'd switch over immediately.
You'd force yourself to switch out of Final Cut.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Just in a heartbeat. I'd be back. The thing is, I need Photoshop. I need Final Cut. I need Logic. I could switch out Final Cut and Logic for Adobe Audition and stuff.
Yeah.
And then I'd just have a Windows VM to play games.
Yeah.
And that'd be it. And then, I'd be free of Apple hell.
I mean, yeah, that's extremely appealing. But I don't know. I mean, right now I use a lot of Apple products because I have to use one, or because I'm sort of tied to the Mac OS X ecosystem for reasons. Although maybe I won't be for a long time. I don't know. I'm in a state of trying to reconfigure all of my computers again.
Mm-hmm.
So for right now, I'm still kind of tied to the Apple ecosystem. And while I'm tied into the Apple ecosystem, I just want to embrace it fully because we're at a point with like the Internet of Things and all that stuff. If it's hard to have like, I'm going to use an Android phone and then an Apple computer and then a Windows desktop. And then like, because they don't talk to each other. Like if you're using all of one device, then your laptop talks to your phone, and which talks to your watch, which talks to whatever, and that talks to like your lights and your thermostat and all that, and it's all just like sort of in sync, and it's all just, it works together. Talks to your Apple TV or whatever, and all these companies have different. Like you can get the Amazon Fire TV or the the Google Play TV, and that'll integrate with your Android smartwatch. And exactly.
Or your lack of Fire laptop. I don't know. Is there a Fire laptop yet?
Well, no, there's Chromebooks, but I mean Chromebooks will integrate quite well. Like you can cast the screen and cast all sorts of stuff from the Chromebook to the device without any setup. It's great. Like all these companies, if you buy all of their hardware, they do like these cool like exchanges of information, and like seamless transitions between the devices, and I really like that. So I really kind of need to be on one platform, which is hard sometimes because there are downsides to every platform, and I have every platform. I have Windows computers, I have Linux computers, I have Mac computers. Mm-hmm. It's just the ones I primarily use on a day-to-day basis tend to all be of the same make.
I just realized I left the Amazon Echo running.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I want an Echo, but is it open? How open is the Echo?
I haven't played around with it enough to know.
Okay.
I mean, a lot of people are developing stuff for it. The one thing that I don't entirely like, though, is that the problem with open voice command stuff, I believe that basically you can throw up pretty much anything onto your own device. It's the distribution that's tricky. The one thing that I really don't like, though, is that they've set it up so that the way that you interact with, because the problem with voice is name spacing.
Yep.
The way that you interact is that you say, Alexa, ask blah for something. So instead of having like the Echo that can do things, the Echo is like a secretary that has to go ask other departments to do things for you.
Yeah, that was my issue. I mean, the only way I thought about around that is like maybe I'll make my own thing called Jeeves, and I'll be like, Alexa, ask Jeeves to turn off the light. Like, so it would be one consistent.
Ask Jeeves?
Well, that was the joke. Yes, man. Very briefly.
Briefly? That was like the entirety of childhood, man.
Yeah, but my childhood happened at a different time than your childhood.
You forgot to have a childhood. I forgot.
Yeah, I just skipped it. Yeah, go right to Google. Don't need a childhood.
Oh man, but yeah, I mean, so you could do that and basically have your one service be a thing that resolves multiple things.
Yeah.
But even then, I mean, then you're basically just giving yourself the same problem, right? So if I say,
yeah, I know.
If I were to say, okay, Google or Siri or Alexa, turn off the apartment, what does that mean? Does that mean that it should turn off the thermostat? Should it turn off the light? Should it turn off the stereo? Like, what are the... Yeah. This is the problem with voice commands, is that we mean things in such an ambiguous way that it's very difficult to... That if you have some sort of closed platform, then you can say, here are the things, and human, you need to learn that this is what you need to say when you want this thing to happen.
Yeah.
When you open it up for multiple services, then it's kind of a free-for-all, because you don't know what the other commands are that people are already learning from
Yeah.
plugins.
Yeah. I mean, which is why they had to basically ask someone else, right? Like,
Right.
ask Hue to turn off the lights, or ask Nest to turn down the thermostat.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. Again, it's like one of those total home platform things. Although Amazon's really the only one who has a whole home voice command solution at this point. Either Google or Apple have come out with sort of an Alexa-esque device.
Although way to segue into the show notes. Google did just announce that they're opening up an API for their voice stuff.
Right. But even that, they don't have, like, a puck. Like, you'd have to have your phone. See, I've done this before. I've had an Nexus 5, and I, like, sellotaped it to the wall, and then I would just yell at the wall. And it was plugged in all the time, so it was always listening.
Right.
The problem is that the microphone array in a Nexus 5 is very much designed for, like, talking on the phone, holding it right next to your head.
Right.
It doesn't work so well across the room, which is what the microphone array in the Echo is designed to be used for.
Mm.
So I imagine you could resolve that by plugging in an external microphone. I just never did.
Well, right. I mean, up until now, the same problem is that you couldn't just say, let me access the voice commands through some sort of API from this custom hardware that I built. Now with Google opening things up, you can just buy a whole bunch of mics, duct tape them together. But, I mean, not that you're necessarily going to do this, but it opens up the possibility for communities or Kickstarters or whatever to say, we're going to build something that's based off of this service, so that you can have something that is designed like the Echo, or maybe like a series of small little things that you put all over your house or whatever.
Yeah.
And just using the voice resolution stuff to back it. Because the software has also been a big problem. The free voice recognition stuff is... I mean, it's long been a challenging problem, and it's not really gotten better since the early 90s.
Well, when I was doing this with a Nexus, there were rootable plugins for Tasker.
Yeah.
That you could have it do certain things, call certain APIs. So I had it like set up to control my lights. I had it set up to control basically the lights, and then the Raspberry Pi that I had controlling my home theater system. So it could just sort of throw HTTP requests at things. And I had it wasn't even local. It wasn't even a local web server. I had a if this then that type thing. So it was like translating. Oh. It was a little clunky, but it worked in technical terms. So I'm actually, now that they're opening up this voice API, I kind of expect them to introduce an Echo clone at I/O now.
Maybe, but
That
I mean, But I mean, if you look at what they did with Google Cardboard, their cardboard is pretty crappy.
Yeah.
Like, they're just like, here's an idea for how VR could work, and cheaply or expensively, you go ahead and make it. We're just going to support the software. We're going to support the spec.
Yeah, but they haven't really. Like, Google Cardboard is some of the worst VR tech there is. It's light years behind Oculus and light years behind
in what
Vive.
Well, I mean, it's not designed to be like a game platform.
True. Well, it's not even the game, like the quality, I would say. Well, I mean, obviously, build quality is
based on your
cardboard.
phone, really.
Yeah, true, but I don't know. There seems to be a lot more. Well, so you have like the Gear VR. The Gear VR is not based on Google Cardboard. Right. I don't believe.
Right.
And that uses your phone as well.
If you have a Samsung phone, yes.
Yeah, it's like a very small subset of Samsung phones.
Right, because this is the way that you get VR to take off, is you restrict it down to fewer and fewer and fewer people possible who can use it.
I have a friend who's developing an application for Gear VR.
Okay.
And like his phone overheats all the time, and he had like the top of the line phone. Like doing VR is such a CPU intensive task at the moment, or GPU intensive task. Like it's a processing heavy. There's like legitimate reasons to have such high specs for it as a requirement, because you can't do much with it without them, right? So the limiting factor isn't necessarily that Samsung's like, we'll get everyone to buy the best possible phone. I think it legitimately is like, it's kind of not worth it without those specs.
Right. The VR is an interesting area in that it's just not worth it, period.
Okay. So did you see let's go to another thing the show notes.
Right. Yeah, we've got a lot of overlap in these show notes. Like we've hit on like 3 or 4 of these already.
Yeah.
This is definitely going to be the podcast of VR and protocols and techie toys and things, and
yeah.
I have a section of complaints. We've got some show notes today.
We should talk. Like, is this the last episode of the season?
I don't know, Alex. Is it?
I feel like we should do one more.
Okay.
I want to call it we do 10 episodes per season, but that would be the 11th. I want to call it the Off by One special.
Right. We'll have an off by one. Yeah. So Alex and I have talked about this. We talked about this a few weeks ago off the air, but figured that it would probably be good so that we don't get boring on you to take a few weeks between seasons, and because we're coming up on around the amount that we had last season, it is an appropriate time. Whoa. That's weird. Okay. Okay, so it sounded like I lost all audio in this ear. Now my ear is ringing. Okay, so my ear just decided to stop hearing anything.
Oh.
That's very weird. Like that's because like like occasionally your ear's ringing for whatever reason, but like this is just like an instant like cutoff, as though like the thing just went from stereo to like panned all the way.
So did the bit rate between your ears and your brain decrease?
Like there's a short in my ear cables. Like what the heck is going on?
Buy some new ones on Amazon.
Oh man. No, so we talked about that. Basically, it would take a few weeks. Let Alex get going on his new job. It's going to be very exciting.
Again, probably.
Let me get going on probably fixing up the site a little bit, because it's getting to be a little unwieldy.
You're putting that in the podcast now.
What's that?
Ooh. You've been talking about revamping this podcast site literally all season.
Well, it's
like now you're putting it in the podcast. So
yeah. Well, part of the problem is it's on. Yeah, I'm using Amazon and Amazon Web Services, and the way that I set it up is particularly bad, because it means that basically I'm re-uploading the entire site, including all of the audio files, every time I push an update.
Oh,
the way that it's automated. So paying a little bit of a bandwidth transfer premium for that.
Oh.
So
I didn't.
Yes.
Yeah, interesting.
By the way, Alex, I'll be sending you a bill for your half of the podcast.
Okay, that's fine. The check will be in the mail.
But okay, VR. Lead us into this.
Okay, so there's a video in the show notes, which I recommend you check out. It's basically lets you use your computer in space, kind of. So what it does is, if you have an Oculus Rift VR headset thing, you can put it on, and you can render your desktop environment in like this as like a floating, really thin screen in space. So it's like a space nebula that's like a 360 sphere that you can look around in, and then it renders like a giant display, which would be your computer, which is your desktop screen on your Windows computer.
Right.
And so you can like do things like browse the internet in Chrome.
Is it only a Windows computer?
I think it is Windows only at the moment. Yeah. Oculus is Windows only at the moment.
Oh. Okay.
As a general, the creator of Oculus, Palmer Luckey, has gone on record saying, we'll come to Mac when they have good enough hardware to support it.
All right.
Because even the top-end GPUs in the Mac Pro aren't supported by Oculus.
Okay.
They're just not powerful enough. Again, VR is a very computationally intensive task.
Right.
You literally need the top three, one of the top 3 NVIDIA GPUs to use it, or the top 3 AMD GPUs. I think the
Or a
cheapest of
phone.
all. Yeah, or a phone. I like for Oculus and HTC.
Can I plug a phone into my computer into my MacBook, and then it could just use that to do all the VR stuff?
Probably, yeah.
All right, I'm gonna. Yeah, I don't know what sort of USB cable I'd need for that, but
Yeah, I don't know how the resolution. I imagine it's a resolution thing. The phone may be running at sort of a downscaled resolution when it does it, and then like the Vive and the Oculus are running at like 1440p or something like that. So, and then you're rendering 2 screens with like very little time because otherwise you're induced lag.
Right.
So like the cheapest GPU that's actually VR certified is like $400.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a cheap field to get into at the moment, and then you have to spend like the $700 for the headset itself.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do all that on your Windows computer, you can basically just like lie in bed or sit upside down or do whatever you want, and you can have a wraparound computer.
Right. Well, I mean, a wraparound environment in which, because your screen is still restricted to whatever screen resolution your screen is.
Yeah, and that's unfortunately a Windows problem.
Right.
So Windows won't let you render additional desktops unless they're like a physical monitor for them to render to.
Right.
So you can get around that by buying like dummy dongles. So if you have like a graphics card with like 4 monitor outputs, you could plug in 1 real monitor and then like 3 fake monitors.
Yes.
And then you could render all of those and just
Now you're still going to pay the GPU performance penalty for all 3 of those.
Well, right, but you're going to be you'll render all 4 desktops,
Right.
Like because, I mean, you're going to have to render them one way or another. It doesn't really matter if they get drawn onto a physical display or not.
Though you can't stitch them to 360 degrees. Like you can't have your 4th desktop connect to.
Okay. It's only stitchable in one direction.
I believe so. Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, that's kind of disappointing, but
Right.
whatever. Because then you could like sit in your chair and like spin around and have like a wireless keyboard or something.
Well, if you think about it, it kind of makes sense just from a not anticipating how that should work perspective. Like, well, let's say you're on desktop 2 and you hit maximize. Where should should it maximize to the? Should it pin to the left of 2 and maximize its circular? But what happens if that's
Okay. All right. I guess it does make sense that you have to have an edge to it. Right. But anyway, so you can like render all these things in like 3D. And I think it's really hilarious. If you watch the video, it's a really long video for what it's showing off, I think. But if you watch like the whole video, like towards the end, you can render yourself in a empty movie theater and have like a movie screen projecting for you, and then you can like play your video files.
Right.
And pretend to be in a movie theater, which I think is hilarious.
So you know what this reminded me of a lot is Compass Fusion.
Yeah,
from good old Linux, where you had your you had all of those desktop spaces and the cubes and
the cube. The cube was all the rage in middle school.
The cube was amazing. And now, were you an outside cube or an inside cube person, Alex?
I was an outside cube.
Oh, you're so wrong. Inside cube is where it's at.
No, outside cube, and it would like pull out. You could see the whole cube. You could pretend the Earth was a cube. You could do it on a sphere too, and then you could have like the Earth.
Yep. So the thing that I really like to do, and I can't do this now. Like technology has reverted such that I can't do this anymore. So for those who don't know, Linux had this, I guess, desktop tiling environment. There were extensions on top of it.
Multi-desktop, yeah.
Right.
It's a multi-desktop setup.
Right. So, and basically you could structure these into, and you would have all of these various key shortcuts to switch back and forth between these desktops, but you could arrange them in such a way that it would appear to be like you were inside a cube or on the outside of a cube. You could set up the actual window, the window tiles to stand in relief, so you could give them depth and things like that. And you could have a thing that would wrap around. You could have some window that was half on one desktop and half on another, so it would wrap around. And lots of really cool stuff. What I used to do, though, and I loved this, is I would set it up so that I was inside the cube and the cube was semi-transparent. And then you still get to declare some sort of skybox if you do that. Mm-hmm. So I would set up I would be inside the cube, it'd be semi-transparent, and then the skybox would be a movie.
Huh.
So I would just watch movies, and I could flip back and forth between tasks within my cube just fine.
Yeah.
And then I got to do all my work and stuff while talking back and forth. Like, never had to interrupt myself, never had to pause the movie or anything. It's just like, I'm just gonna flip around this cube, do all this work. Meanwhile, this movie's sitting there playing transparently in the background, which is wonderful.
Huh.
It's the greatest thing of all time.
Yeah, I mean, you could totally do that with that. I bet you could set the skybox inside this
But
weird
you can't
VR
do
environment.
that on Mac or Windows right now. Like,
Well, you could probably do it on Mac. You could probably recompile Compass Fusion and port it over. You can get KDE running on Mac OS X.
really can't. Well, I mean, if you run everything within Quartz, I guess.
Yeah.
Ugh.
It's janky and doesn't really work, but I bet
Right.
you could make it technically work.
But still, this is like, how can I not already do this everywhere? Like, why do we not have the Minority Report as a desktop on
Well-
all of the operating systems yet?
I mean, I honestly think Apple went backwards in terms of spaces, because they used to have spaces, which was very much
They still
like...
have spaces.
Well, they do have spaces, but I used to have a 2x2 grid of spaces. So I'd have 4 separate desktops and a hotkey to go between them.
Yes.
Now all your spaces have to be in a row.
Yep.
So I used to be able to, from any one space, get to any other space directly. I had like a key command that would just like shift the display, either diagonally or up and down.
Right. You know what'd be great for that, actually?
What?
The numpad, 10 key.
No, I had
Right.
I had it bound to the arrow keys. Much more convenient.
Terrible. Well, then you can't do diagonal. 10 key is amazing.
No, you'd hold up and down or down and left. Not up and down.
You Emacs users and your cording.
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, go on.
But now they're all in a row. So now you can slide. You have to like go past them.
I
Like,
think you can go by number, maybe.
Yeah, but then you have to. I could one hand. I could do one hand, and I could hit whatever key combination I needed to, and I could get there. Now I have to like Command Option and then the number, and then it still like slides past them to get to it. It doesn't.
That
go
is one
direct.
thing I would really like to disable the slide animation. I've not sunk the time into figuring out how exactly to do that.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think Spaces has gone a little bit backwards, though. I do love that you can have Spaces on separate. Like each display can have its own space setup, which is nice. I don't know. That's just a weird Mac OS X complaint I have. But that's just me complaining about Mac OS X, and it doesn't really matter. We were talking about Oculus, right? Like,
Yes.
I don't know. Now I don't know what to say. It works so well.
This VR desktop thing.
Yeah, I know, but I don't even know what to say on that anymore.
No, okay. So, but the thing though is that how much is the Oculus Rift?
$600.
Okay, and what are the cool reasons to buy? Like, what are any other cool things that you could buy for $600, Alex? I'd like you to list out the things that are cool that you could buy for less than or equal to $600. Go.
So, a drone. You could build
There
a
you go.
really cool quadcopter.
Yep.
For $600. You could buy a PS4 and a bunch of games.
Yep.
If you like that, or a Wii U and even more games.
Yep.
Which would be my choice. You could buy a 4K display, which is really nice.
Absolutely.
You could buy stock and become a millionaire.
Well, given enough time, sure.
Or
Sure,
luck.
I'll give you that one.
You could go gambling and
And then become a millionaire immediately. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly,
Right, that's
yeah.
perfect. I like that. That's the option. That's the option I think we should go with.
Okay. All right. So, would you rather buy an Oculus now or spend the money on the Oculus on gambling and buy it when you're a millionaire?
Well, I mean, because that's the thing is, I think there's a big problem with VR in that there's the chicken and egg problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
That it's not going to get good until people invest money into making it good. It's not going to be worth investing money into
Until it's
people
good.
are using it.
Yeah.
So I feel like all of these, as much as I think VR is incredible and awesome and can be really cool, I think that this is not the time to be throwing out, $3,000 or $600 or whatever price tag items. This is why I think the Google Cardboard is a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Is that it is incredibly cheap and it is very low quality, but you know what it is? it's the same quality as the software that is written for VR right now. Like it is right around the same level. Like trying to build a ridiculously expensive device to do VR so that you can go in and be like, here's this test world that we built.
So I think one step above cardboard is probably the optimal space. So I think the Gear VR is probably the best implementation of VRR that there is right now. Because you have this phone. Sure, it only runs on high-end phones, but as time
only on
goes,
Samsung high-end phones.
Yeah, right. But I think Apple, there's rumors that Apple is working on a similar product. So I think the Gear VR concept is really smart, because you can get fairly good immersion and head tracking on a device that a lot of people are already going to own anyway. Like
Right.
the S7 or the S6 or whatever the Galaxy equivalent. Yeah, I think that's the Galaxy S6 was the first one to support it, and the Galaxy S7 is going to come with it free.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if you buy a Galaxy S7 right now, you get a Gear VR for free.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, those devices, like the S6, which you could buy the Gear VR for, sold, like, millions of devices. So, you're going to have millions and millions of users of the Galaxy
to be
S7.
fair, Alex, if you get literally anything delivered by Amazon, you get cardboard for free. So
Yeah, but then you have to build it, and, like, it's hard. Like, you have to, you can't build the lenses. You have
Right.
to,
No.
you do have to buy the lens.
I am trolling just a small amount.
Just a small amount. So, I think that's sort of the good, like, it's accessible, and it's pretty good. It's not the best. It's not as good as what you're going to find in Oculus or
Well, I mean,
Vive
accessible in the sense of only working on high-end Samsung phones. Like this is, if you were going to try and find a niche market, like this seems ridiculous. And I don't think you can claim that like will work on all Android and will work at least in YouTube on all iOS. I think that's pretty accessible. I think that's probably as accessible you can hope for in this very territorial tech field.
Yeah. But so I'm arguing more for the idea than the current implementation. So if Apple also had like $100 headset, and if perhaps the Gear VR wasn't tied specifically to the Samsung devices, though Samsung I think are the largest market share. Like the S6 is probably
of Android, they're the largest market share. Yeah.
Yeah, so you have the majority of the Android devices, and if you added then the Apple devices...
Well, I mean, I don't think that you can say that the S6 and S7 are the majority of Android.
Okay,
Android
that's
devices.
true. Yeah, no, you're right.
In fact, I think the majority of Android devices are like flip phones. They're like really, really crappy.
Yeah, maybe. That's possible. And regardless, there's like millions of them out there. Millions of compatible phones.
Yep.
So if you could expand this perhaps to a few more phones, and that's the thing, over time, like the processing requirements aren't necessarily going to rise as quickly. It depends on how quickly the display resolution rises, and how much what resolution it actually makes sense to run the phone at, to get good performance. But assuming that the cheaper devices are going to be using the lower res screens that like currently exist, and if those are then said to be good enough, like over the next 2 to 4 years, most Samsung phones may support the Gear VR, and they might open it up, and so most Android phones, well, maybe not most, but most higher end mid-range, like maybe you get it free on contract, or maybe you spend a couple $100 type devices. And assuming Apple comes along in the next 2 to 4 years, like they're rumored to do, and has their own sort of Gear VR competitor, then I think you've got you have your phone. A lot of people have smartphones, so you already have the smartphone, and then you pair this relatively cheap like headset with it, and then you can have like the App Store type ecosystem where you can download games and applications and utilities that run in like this VR environment. I think that's fairly a really good place for VR to be right now. I think things like the HTC Vive and the Oculus Rift headset are sort of extremely
and the
niche.
HoloLens. You gotta remember the HoloLens.
So I think HoloLens is trying to be something different than either the... HoloLens is like... I don't know what it's trying to be yet. It's not out yet. No one's reviewed it yet. it's kind of this weird, like, Microsoft heard about VR and just decided to do their own thing in a vacuum. They're like, hey, we have Minecraft. Why don't we just try to make a Minecraft computer that sits on your head and in VR? Yeah, I'm not quite sure what to think of the whatever the HoloLens thing would do dad yet. The point being is that I think that the high end, like $700 things are going to be extremely niche devices for a long time. Like, even once you have the $600 headset, you need like at least a $1,200 computer to use it properly. Like, to get the supported minimum is like $1,200.
Right.
It's just, you can't really, you have to have like a high end NVIDIA or AMD graphics card, and then like a high end Intel i5 processor or better, and that's like $300, and then all the other components.
So, I mean, it makes sense if you're a gaming YouTuber, because then it's an expense. But it also then doesn't make any sense if you're a gaming YouTuber, because that experience does not translate.
Like, unless they also have like a 3D viewer. Although, like, they could play the game in 3D, like with an Oculus, and then save the 360 video, and then you could watch it on a cheap.
Well, and actually, that,
playback,
I mean, that
like
could
cardboard.
be an interesting entry, just in that, because the cardboard has no problem playing video,
Right? Yeah.
on really cheap phones.
Yeah.
So gamers go ahead and record stuff using their expensive investments, and then people's experiences with 360 VR is enjoying Let's Plays and going, "Hey, there was a dude behind you, that was funny."
Yeah.
Whatever the case may be.
Yeah. I mean, I think like lots of things, it's probably gonna get its first life in 360 video. I've thought about trying to shoot some 360 video. You can buy like fairly cheap cameras now that can do 360. They don't necessarily do it in super high quality, but they're fairly easy to use, and they're not. It's like back in the day when you could shoot with your webcam and put it on YouTube.
Mm.
I haven't really thought of anything interesting to do with it, right? Like, why is it beyond the novelty of just doing it in 360? What does it add?
Right, and well, and in fact, at least from my experience of watching a lot of, not a lot, but a decent amount of 360 video.
Yeah.
The big problem is directing attention.
Yep.
The whole idea is that you're giving the user freedom to frame their own experience, but that ends up being oftentimes more problematic than it's worth, because there may be something interesting happening over in a certain area if you don't have a soundscape that's also 360.
Yeah.
Which you don't in video. At least currently in YouTube's, in the means of distribution that we currently have, there's not an equivalent soundscape.
Well, you could if you made the user wear headphones.
No, even if you did make them wear headphones, you have a left and a right channel, or you have a surround channel. The surround channel doesn't track.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, it doesn't track with where you're facing. I was like,
Right.
you could encode a 360 sound, but yeah, then you can't track position in it.
Right. Yeah. No. You can definitely you can do the ASMR type stuff, that people do, but you can't actually track it with the head position, which makes it problematic.
Yeah.
I don't know. Video's hard.
Well, I mean, there's a reason that the people pay like directors millions of dollars to direct a Hollywood movie. Like, the direction of a video is very important.
Right.
How do you set that up for VR is a really huge, outstanding question.
Well, and it's also, I mean, even if you look at things like gaming, sandbox games are popular, but they're not popular with everybody. I mean, for a significant amount of the player base, like, I would like you to tell me a story. I would like to experience the thing that you want to tell me. Don't just drop me in an open world and go like, you pick what you want to do. Like, stuff is going to happen. Like, I've never been able to get into Grand Theft Auto for that reason.
I've never even played it. It's just never appealed to me.
I played it for like 15 minutes. I'm like, all right, I'm driving around, I'm stealing cars, and then, all right, I've experienced, wow, that was a fast game. Like, it's, there are a lot of people who do like it, but it's just to say it's not necessarily the thing where it's going to have some sort of universal appeal. I don't think it's like, it's not like going to widescreen, or just moving from VHS to DVD or something like that, where you're like, oh, look, it's just objectively better.
Yeah.
It is an experiential difference that may resonate with some people and may not with others.
Yeah, and trying to make it more than a gimmick is hard. And right now, I think it's hard to justify VR as more than a gimmick in some circumstances. I do think in gaming, it's not necessarily a gimmick. I've only worn one once, but reading a lot of what people talk about and having used it, I would say that there are conceivable ways, and certainly ways that are being used right now, to make it more than a gimmick.
Mm-hmm.
It all depends on the type of game. Like, I think
I can think of a lot of games where like 180 degree rotation.
Yeah.
Like 360 seems obnoxious to me. But there are a lot of games. Like, I'd love to play Euro Truck Simulator with a full, just like, as though I were sitting here. If I were to turn my head, I could look to the right and I could look to the left.
Yeah.
And that does exist. You can do that. I don't have the equipment to do that, but it is a thing. And I'm sure it'd be cool to play Portal that way too. I wouldn't like to have to stand up and turn around anytime I wanted to turn around, but I'd love to be able to just crane my head and do things like that.
Well, I mean, and you don't necessarily have to get like the standing platforms and all. Like, you can use your WASD keys to control like how you're turning and stuff.
Right.
And then you just have like your normal field of view, but you could like adjust where the character is standing.
Right.
So, yeah, I think VR has a lot of implications in gaming, but I have trouble finding anything else that it really works on. Like, this virtual desktop thing, I think is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
It might have some niche uses, but it's probably almost always going to be better if you have like 3 desktops or 3 monitors,
right.
or even just one monitor that isn't floating in space.
I don't think. Well, I would disagree with you there. If I had the ability to just never have a computer again, basically just if there was an Oculus Rift that was Bluetooth only and had a ridiculously great battery life, and my phone could run a full operating system, and we figured out how to make a keyboard awesome and portable, then I would be super, super happy. Like, this would be amazing. Be like, yep, I'm just going to walk around and put on my very light glasses, and I don't have to have a computer that takes up actual space anymore. I can go ahead and be at work while I'm on the train to work. I can go ahead and say I'm going to go outside, or whatever. That basically, your entire work environment kind of can be brought along with you. I would find that to be very valuable. That's not what this does, but it hints as to like this is what we could maybe one day have.
Well, your big problem is that you'll never have a full operating system on a phone, because there's always going to be a better computer than you're going to have a phone, right? And so the phone is never going to be running the same operating system as your computer, just because they're 2 different devices.
Well, no, it could run the same operating system.
Well, it could. I mean, Windows does, but it changes the user interface to be terrible.
Well, I mean, eventually, ideally, though, the phone wouldn't have to have a screen on it.
Right, it would just pair to your
It'd just
whatever,
be,
retina implants.
It'd just be like a second wallet that you have to carry around with you.
Yeah, I mean, and there are concepts that you would like. You'd have one computation device, and it would just either be in your pocket, or you could like plug it into the wall to charge it, or wirelessly charged, perhaps through some sort of system in your house. And then like your desktop would just sort of like be a keyboard, a mouse, and a screen, and it would just use that computation device to.
Well, that's the thing, is I don't want the screen to have to exist in real space.
Right. Yeah. So you'd have either the glasses or the retinal implants, but some people might still like to have like a screen or a television, perhaps.
Yeah, those people would be wrong, but they might.
Yeah, you could see people.
I want to go back to what you were saying though about Apple should introduce theirs and all of this thing. So this is now we need to move into Kevin's complaint corner.
Okay.
So I have a problem with a lot of internet things.
Yeah.
Recently.
Just recently?
No, I have always had problems. I'm just gonna say I love email, Alex.
Yeah.
I think email is a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
A lot of people really hate email.
Yeah.
And I understand hating email. Like I totally understand it. I just think as a concept, as an idea, as a means of communication, it is just top notch.
Yeah.
I think it is a wonderful thing. I also love IRC
Yeah.
as a means of communication, which most people don't even know what that is that we're talked about. IRC.
I don't use it on a regular basis, but I have used it on occasion.
Hmm.
Special events, I would use it at college and stuff.
Oh yeah, it's great for that. It's great for like conferences. You have back channels and talks
Yep.
and stuff, or just I mean, I've got a community of people that I chat with on IRC and stuff. And I like Google Cardboard. I think that it is a great idea to say, here's a way to make something accessible. Let's create a standard and just release it, and then say, go ahead, build something. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
We're not doing any of this anymore.
No?
Instead, we're moving to all of these closed platform as a service model things, or these closed, isolated ecosystems. Of we're using Slack for everything.
Yeah?
There are all these communities that are like, oh, we should use Slack. We should use Slack. Why? It's one company that gets to decide how this whole thing works.
Mm-hmm.
There are people who say, we got to get rid of email. You should use Facebook Messenger. You should use WhatsApp or Slack Chat or Yik Yak or Chat Back. I don't know. Whatever these kids are using these days. I'm going to rename the segment Kids These Days.
Okay. All right. Kevin's kids these days.
Right.
That doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense either. No, but it's frustrating to me that I think we're now in a position where we've become so enamored with the idea that companies just provide things on demand, and we've monetized the internet so much that I'm terrified of when is the next cool thing we're going, like the web is not a for-profit platform as a service. Like HTTP is not a for-profit platform as a service. Email is not. Protocols like IRC chat. The wonderful thing about IRC chat is that anybody can create their own server, can create their own client. It's just here's a description of how this thing works. If you want to build it, go nuts.
Yeah.
And my fear is that as we move toward all of these things, whether it's VR, whether it's keeping in touch with people, whether it's anything, we're no longer going to do that. When is the next? I guess, is SMS open? SMS is open. It's just a protocol.
Yeah.
Jabber, I guess, was opened.
Yeah.
It didn't start off as one, but it became an open chat protocol for Google Talk and AIM and Yahoo and stuff. They at least supported the protocol.
Yeah.
I'm terrified I think we're going to stop supporting protocols now. We're just going to go. I'm just going to let Apple run this thing.
So I guess here's a clarifying question. So it doesn't bother you that a lot of people like use Gmail and stuff?
No.
Okay. So I was thinking about trying to create a version of Twitter. Like back when Twitter was doing the I was thinking through like, what if you made a Twitter-like thing that was basically just a clone of email, but
right.
was different? Like fork email and change it so it's like quicker and like, I don't know. I try to figure out how to rewrite the email protocol to make it work like Twitter. And I was like, that could be a really fun thing.
Well, I mean, because, there was a lot of, we're going to change Twitter for the worse going around.
It didn't really come to pass.
It didn't really come to pass. But no, I had the same thought. I was like, what would an open version of Twitter look like? Basically, where it's like, if we don't like the way that one company is doing it, just not use that company's version of it.
And doing it open like that potentially would remove the need for any surveying. Like you could start your own version of Twitter really easily.
Right.
Like you could download like Twitter clone like things off GitHub and just host them and then say, hey, everyone come use Alex or whatever. Whatever you wanted to call it.
Oh man, I hope you've copywritten that. Otherwise someone's going to go in domain squat.
Yeah.
Alex let us know in the comments if you've stolen. Leave us an iTunes review.
Yeah, with the sign up page. So it's like, well, you could just copy email. But then I'm like, but why? I don't know. I mean,
the whole idea with Twitter though is that it is not a you have to read everything in your stream.
Yeah.
And this is one of my complaints about things like Slack is that their notification system is based on you will read everything that anybody posted in any of these chat rooms that you have to be in. and that there's no like button that's like, I'm back. I don't care. I don't care what happened yesterday. Like there's not a,
Yeah.
Whereas with things like IRC or with Twitter, there's a, I'm just gonna, I have the ability to write that off. Email is not. Email is a, unless you explicitly decide to, there's an expectation that you read the stuff that comes in. It's an inbox, not a stream.
Yeah. So, I mean, but I guess the question I had, like, it takes people like us, Kevin, who would just say, I'm going to go write an open source platform thing called Twitter, and it's just going to be a protocol, and people can build their own, like, I'll have a small little official server or something, or like an example server that people could run, and it will have like an example client, and then I'll have like an example like GitHub hosted web client that people could use. Like, that's how I would think protocols come to an existence, because you really can't have a business model based on a protocol, right? Like,
well, I mean, you have this is the question of how do you monetize open source,
right?
And there are three different ways that happens. One is that you have the Android model, where you have this sort of half open source and half not.
Yeah.
The two is that you have something that is open source, and then you have a freemium version of it. And then the third is that you have the basically you win by having a support contract around that open source software. So stuff like Red Hat.
Yeah.
So I mean, yes, if you develop the email protocol, and then you also invent Gmail, then it's in your interest to encourage people to use email, even if they don't use Gmail, because you're dealing with network effects.
So I mean, and that was basically the conclusion I came to, was like, hey, if people really don't like Twitter and want to get off it, and then it kind of didn't really happen, I was like, well, I could make a protocol, and then I'll make a Gmail,
right? And
then I'll just have a thing. And I mean, but if you're already writing the web app, why would you want to allow yourself, if you were a company and not just an individual person who thought it was a cool or good idea, why would you not make it so you have to use your platform?
Right.
And I think that's the issue.
Well, the one answer is the network effect thing. That basically, if I'm Apple and I say I want to create this thing, I want to create iMessage. I'm going to create a better iMessage.
Yep.
And I discover that half of my users only have friends who have Android phones.
Yep.
Well, then either I have to convince the Android community to let me have Apple iMessage on Android, or I can then make an open protocol.
Yeah. So you either have to develop...
Hey, maybe somebody else wants to build an Android version. You totally could, and then someone else will, and then all of a sudden your Apple users are happy.
But companies like Apple are either big enough so they just don't let you talk to Android users, and they don't care, which is what Apple does, or they develop it themselves. Like, they have... If they decide it's a thing they want to do, they're not just going to open it up and hope someone else does it. They're just going to say, all right, well, whatever... we'll just throw some engineers at it and make a half-decent version, and whatever, which is sometimes what happens.
Well, and the thing is, I think this is a relatively new problem. It's like, I'm not trying to argue that, like, oh, well, there's obviously an answer to this. I'm afraid that you may be right, and there may not be an answer to this. I don't know, because if you look at the big protocols that were established, most of them were established before there were big internet companies.
Yeah.
And even now, if you look at stuff like email, if I send an email from my IP using, like, SendMail, it's probably going to get bounced. It's probably not going to show up in your Gmail inbox.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know
There's
that.
not, because I don't have a trust chain.
Oh.
I'm going to get classified as spam by the majority of email clients.
Huh.
So you asked me before if I have a problem with Gmail. I don't have a problem with Gmail. I do worry, though, that the way that we treated email... And, I mean, I don't know what the right solution would have been.
Well, that's
but basically
the whole
because we've got
problem.
this whole issue with spam and stuff, is that we do filter out, like, hey, this is why people use things like MailChimp rather than sending out managing their mailing list themselves.
Yeah.
Or actually, for a while, years ago, it used to be that, like, if you got an email from Gmail, then Outlook would be like, nope.
Huh.
Which is always fun.
Well, I mean, I think that's just an inherited problem from the whole problem of trust that we have.
Right.
I mean, if you solve trust, I think you could probably solve that. Well, I mean, you couldn't prevent companies from saying, hey, you don't want to receive email from people who use Outlook, right? Like, you couldn't stop Gmail from doing that, but
Right.
you might remove some of their perhaps legitimate concerns now, and they might be a little more trusting.
Right.
For things like send, like if you could verify that you were if you were sending an email from at kevingeesey.com and you could verify that you owned kevingeesey.com, like you had the certificates in place, then I don't see any legitimate reason why Gmail should
I don't think they terminate. I think just it always ends up in the spam.
Well, the spam, right? Yeah.
Which, that's machine learning. They learn that, like, hey, if there aren't thousands of emails coming from this domain, it's probably not a real domain. Because, like, Gmail can trust email from other Gmail accounts because they're Gmail. Yahoo can also be reasonably sure, hey, this thing came from a Gmail account, and it's probably fine. The majority of these are fine. This came from some untrusted IP address that just spun up yesterday. I wonder if it's spam or not. Like, generally, you classify that as probably spam.
Yeah.
So it's really it's just a side effect of trying to help users out. It's not some sort of malicious thing, but it is a point where we're going like, okay, now this is becoming less of a protocol thing and more of a platform thing, just because of the nature of how we've set up our email.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not really certain how to solve when the platform, which was built on a protocol, gets big enough that it can start dictating different rules and perhaps changes to the protocol.
Then Mozilla Firefox.
Yeah. It got too big.
So I guess what happens is Apple has to get mad about Google and just go completely open source. Is that what's next?
Yeah. Yep. That's probably
open phones.
That will not be Apple.
But no, when you were talking about VR, like the whole idea of, well, Samsung will have theirs and Apple will have theirs. Yeah. And Google will have theirs. This is why I like Google Cardboard, is that it's the one that isn't locked down. Like that I like. I'm a fan of that. I don't know about
also the most limited version. It's also the most limited version. What, can play videos?
It can play. No, it can do games as well.
Okay.
In fact, you can. I went just for fun. I ended up there. I played with what was it, 3JS.
Okay.
And I was able to create like a landscape and rotate around with it and stuff in the so you can create a web page.
I mean, but the things like the thing like your VR has is it has a whole bunch of built-in sensors that it stole from Oculus, and so it has much more precise position tracking, which is what makes it a better device than the Cardboard.
Oh yeah, I don't argue that's not a better device. I'm just concerned about. I don't want to. The problem is that this isn't the traditional adage is that when there are a lot of competitors, the users win, the customer wins.
Yeah,
I don't think that's the case here, because you're talking about people who own a Samsung phone can use the Samsung thing. People who own an Apple phone can use the Apple thing. People who own a Google phone can use the Google thing. People can this isn't going to be a case where the best technology wins out for people. This isn't the case where we're looking at like Blu-ray versus HD DVD. It's not like, hey, let's evaluate these two technologies on their merits. And this would be like that, except if Apple said, we are only going to play Blu-ray, and Windows said, we are only going to play HD DVD. The choice is not really which of these is the better technologies. The choice is, what am I stuck with right now, and do I want to have to get rid of everything and replace it from the ground up to try out this other thing?
And this is what we sort of started the podcast on. Like, I haven't switched away from Apple devices partly, arguably largely nowadays, because of the sunken costs.
Yep.
Like, their ecosystem, things that don't translate, that I know how to use or have paid for, that I'll either just have to throw out the window or just keep using Apple devices, right? Like,
but if we had things like, if we just accepted protocols and standards, like we just Bluetooth is a thing, or USB is a thing. You don't need a lightning cable. Like, we could just use USB, and then all the devices would work with all the other devices. It'd be amazing.
Yeah.
But we don't do that.
Nope. We don't. And I think that's a problem, but I don't know how to fix it. You'd have to force all the companies to not do stupid things.
Well, but I mean, you were talking about how cool it was that there was synergy across your devices.
Yeah,
I don't think it's cool at all. I think it's a big problem.
It's cool. It doesn't mean it doesn't cause problems, but it also doesn't mean that it's not cool.
I don't know. I think that the idea that I can't cast between my Android phone and my MacBook, I think that's a bug.
No, I agree. I think there should be synergy across all devices.
Right. Exactly.
I think that would be really cool. But at the moment that it's there, but at the moment it's just synergy across specific device manufacturers. So it's still cool. It still does the same thing, but you're more restricted in what you can use with it. I agree. It would be much cooler if it worked across everything, and then I'd have less of this entrenched cost.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that it's not the same thing. It's just what requires different hardware, and one can be used with anything.
I don't know. I don't like it, Alex. We there should, like, AirPlay or whatever it's called, like whatever the abstract concept of AirPlay is.
Yeah.
It's so obviously a standard. Like that is the primary case of, like, this is a thing that should be a protocol that should just be like, this is how you take a screen and put it on another screen. Like, here's a description of how to do those things, and then you would have, like, these are VisiStream compliant devices.
So, with iMessages and AirPlay, I swear when they were announced, they were said that they'll be open sourced. I don't think they ever were.
I swear you were wrong.
I don't think they ever did. But, like, when iMessages came, FaceTime. It was FaceTime.
Oh.
When FaceTime came out, and FaceTime was the precursor to iMessages, because FaceTime came out, and then they were like, we have this video chat client. How about we add, like, texting on top of it?
That's right. They're like, hey, so you've been texting now. Now we've created this really cool way for you to talk with people over video and voice. And they're like, oh yeah, people prefer to text because it's texting. All right, well, let's make texting easier then.
All right, so here's what happened.
Okay.
So they announced FaceTime in 2010, and they said they were going to make it open source. The problem is they based some of their technology on a suite of software or some technology based on patents owned by VernetX, and they lost a patent lawsuit. So they couldn't open source it because they built FaceTime and thus iMessages on top of something that was owned by someone else, and someone else didn't want to open source it, and they lost the patent suit.
That sounds like a really, really convenient problem for them to have.
Yes, I agree. I think it's dumb, and and they're Apple. They could just
rewrite it.
But
we can't afford that. That could take us 3 weeks of a few developers working.
Right. Exactly.
Apple, that would be an egregious.
Yep. I mean, I don't know, but that's why they decided to not open source.
Video chat's a good example, though. That's another one. And you and I have been stymied by this for a long time, dealing with either Google Hangouts or now we're on Skype. FaceTime would be another option, but I rejected that one because it won't work across operating systems, and I don't want to promise I'm always going to be on a MacBook.
Yep.
But that's another one. We're like, it's video chat. Like, it's very simple. You're sending video, you're sending audio. We know how that works. There could be one spec. There's no reason that these have to be different services. This could be like...
I don't know, man.
And I'm scared of what's going to happen.
Well, so let's start writing our own open source protocols.
Well, the problem is getting people to use them. The problem is that we're now in a position where internet companies have such an ability to market their own products and such an ability to lock people in or out of their own products. Like, Spotify.
Well, let's just build all of our own products, and then we won't have to worry about what the other companies do.
You realize that's exactly what the other companies are doing. We'll just create a closed open ecosystem.
No. We won't close it off. If other companies would like to implement it, the source code's right there. If you want to use our protocol for voice communication. There you go. Like Google, I think Google would happily implement an iMessage client.
Zoom
but Apple
would
won't
build
let
something
them.
on top of what a Ubuntu phone.
Well, I'm sure. Why not? We could do that.
Huh?
I mean, why not? And then we could build our own open source like Twitter replacement protocol and force everyone to use that.
Well, actually, I was thinking about it. I'm not entirely sure how you do a Twitter replacement.
Okay. Why not? I was thinking you could combine email and Bitcoin.
Well, email, you're dealing with email. You have to archive old tweets, which you don't necessarily want to do.
Why wouldn't you want to archive them?
Because because the sender is authoritative. So if they delete a tweet, you've still got it, which is really all that Twitter is just RSS. It's just an RSS reader.
Yeah, but RSS messages can get lost really easily.
Yeah, but then you have the feed, so you just retrieve.
Oh, that's true.
Right.
I was thinking IRC, not RSS.
Oh yeah, no, RSS.
Yeah.
Good old RSS. I love RSS, by the way. This is another one of the things that I like very, very much. I wanted to make sure that I started off my list of complaints by saying I like these things a lot. And I understand that there are value to things like iMessage, and I understand that there are value to push notifications and all this junk. But man, there's these old technologies have not stuck around just because we haven't come up with better ideas.
Yeah.
There are actual good reasons why they exist. And it makes me sad that we don't seem to recognize that anymore, Alex.
I'm sorry, Kevin. I don't know what to tell you. We just need to form our new company that does everything, but it does everything open source.
Let's do it.
So we'll call it Open
Two
Google.
broke guys.
Open. Well, I mean, what? Google was started by two broke people. They were college students. They had no money. They ran it on a server that they held together with Legos. Although Legos aren't cheap, so, maybe they had more money than they were letting on.
Well, no, they also will sue, like, Duplos and stuff, so I don't know. Legos does not seem very open, Alex.
Well, okay. We won't use, we'll use 3D printed Legos. Whatever
All right.
those are called.
All right.
We'll 3D print our own
Lowercase
Legos.
L Legos.
Yeah, or Eggo. Well, no, Egos is the thing. Leo.
Ah,
We'll
man.
call it Leo.
Trademarks are nightmare.
Leos. We'll call them Leos.
Leos, all right.
Low Earth Orbitos.
Now, we've never talked about this on the podcast, but tardigrades are incredibly cool.
Okay.
We've obviously talked about tardigrades on the podcast quite a bit. They're perhaps a little overrepresented across the animal kingdom on this podcast.
Yes, I agree.
But tardigrades are incredibly awesome, and we did report on a story. I think it was the end of last season. I love that I can refer to things by seasons. So it feels so professional.
Yeah. Okay.
But no, there was this story that basically there was a lot of genetic drift. That basically they discovered, like, hey, they sequenced a tardigrade, and they're like, hey, most of your DNA is not your DNA.
Yeah, I remember
And
that.
that was crazy. Turns out,
And that was wrong.
yeah, not only was it wrong, they found out it was wrong a week later.
And we are just now talking
We're
about
just
it.
now getting to it because I only just discovered this. Basically, this is what happened. They're going around. They've got the DNA strands. They're looking at it. They're counting, A, T, C, the other one.
G.
G. There you go. They're going through the ATCG, 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 and there's some bacteria that's kind of hanging out nearby. At some point, they got bored and started counting that one instead. So yeah, it looked like, wow, this species is adopting a lot of genes from other
This
sources.
one strain of bacteria.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's because they ended up copying stuff over from a different strand of bacteria. The reason that this was news is that it was promoted as being this really crazy idea that maybe this is why they're so resilient, and that because of the way that tardigrades live forever or indefinitely is that they when they get dehydrated, or that they deliberately dehydrate, so that when they freeze, or whenever they reach rough conditions, the water doesn't freeze and thus perforate their body. Because that's the problem with ice and density, is that it explodes things.
If you want to live forever, go to a desert and then go to one of the cold deserts that freezes in the evening.
Exactly. That is the way to go.
You'll dry out and then freeze, and you'll live forever.
But the thinking was that basically the DNA would fragment at that point, and then when they were being revived, they would just, accidentally ingest a whole bunch of incorrect DNA.
Yeah.
And that maybe the idea is that they've become so resilient because they were able to steal much more DNA than regular people do. Or we only steal DNA from our parents. Or they just steal DNA from all of the things.
Yeah, well, they don't.
Yeah, turns out, nope, I was wrong. Science fails. Science is a failed experiment, Alex.
So it turns
Actually,
out
oh my gosh, that is actually, you know what? As dismal as that sounds, I think that is that should be the motto. Science is a failed experiment.
A motto of what?
Of science.
Oh, okay.
Because that is exactly what science is.
I think that's a really, really good tagline for KSP.
I think it's a good tagline for science, man. This is exactly what science is. It is failed experiments after failed experiments after failed experiments.
If I ever open a Science Lab Incorporated, that will be my tagline.